welcome back to Blue Light Together. I'm Taylor, and in this episode we are joined by Darren Woodward, psychotherapist and the principal of Live Life, as we discuss the topic of men's mental health. We explore the reason behind the stigmas, the challenge of being vulnerable, how to approach conversations, the truth about therapy, and DIY practical approaches to bettering your own mental health as a Blue Light member. So without further ado, let's get into it. So thank you so much for joining me today. Could you start just by telling us a little bit more about yourself and giving us a bit of an overview into how men's mental health has interested you during your career?
Sure. I'm Darren Woodward. I've been in the company Turning Point for about 25 years, for a very long time. I qualified as a psychotherapist about just over 20 years ago, and have been practicing as a psychotherapist. I've run psychotherapy services, probably about 15 of them, in my time, and I've worked in kind of residential services as well as kind of doing community services. And in that time, always been interested in men's mental health and providing forum for men to not just talk, but to connect with each other. And so things like men's groups where you talk to each other, but in lots of services that we used to oversee, or I used to oversee, we do kind of practical activities such as like conservation or sport, and that's a kind of really good forum for men to come together, and then off the back of that, connect with them and start talking about what's going on for them. And so that's kind of me, and that's kind of why I'm interested in this subject.
Amazing, thank you so much. So as we know, there's quite a reluctancy to talk about mental health in general and accessing support, but this is even more so the case when it comes to men and their mental health. In your opinion, why do you think that is? Why are people hesitant to talk about it?
I think there's so many reasons for that. I think that that no one really tells you how to be a man when you're a boy, or no one really tells you how to be a boy when you're a boy. That most of the kind of fiction that you see out there is, there's no normal boys kind of that are in fiction or in movies. It would be kind of boring. And I think that for girls and women, that's been part and parcel for popular culture in lots of ways for the last 150 years. And from Little Women to kind of teenage or women's magazines, there's lots of chat. So I think there's a real lack of archetypes and discussion about what it is. But I think that there are implicit expectations societally about what men should be and how men should be. The challenge of being vulnerable. Many men see being vulnerable as being weak, and often they struggle to talk about their feelings because that's what's imprinted upon them. And maybe their kind of father or their brother or kind of friends around them have all taken on the same thing. They don't do that. They don't talk, and so that really is a very tough nut to crack. And finally, I think there's something about having role models. And so many people have got families where there's parents have divorced or separated. It's probably more common in people that have been married since the 2000s than people that have stayed together. I think the statistics say it's very, very common. But I think that having an absent or more absent father can have a big impact on how it is to be a boy, how it is to be a man. But even when parents are together, there can be an absence of a father in the house. They're either absent because they're away, they're working away, they're absent because they're just emotionally unable to go there, and so people lurch towards the mum. So I think that's there's so much in that, but they're some of the main things.
Yeah, I think definitely that confidence to be vulnerable is so important. I saw a video the other day of a man saying he wishes everyone could be a little bit more feminine, was the word he used, because his wife will go to the pub and come back and say, oh, my friend Sarah has panic attacks too, we spoke about that. Whereas when he goes to the pub, it's quite surface level conversation, and it's just having that confidence to break the mold and have those different discussions sometimes.
Absolutely, and I think that often, men go to the pub wanting to have a bit more of a, non-surface level. They kind of engage in bants and other types of pushing it away, not talking about stuff, avoiding things, conversations, and I've seen that. I've been part of that. I've many times, and it's kind of also quite funny. It's also quite engaging. I'm not saying getting rid of it, but it's when it feels like someone's struggling or they can't be themselves, and particularly when you're feeling down or flat or not feeling great, to kind of paint on a face and to kind of pretend to be something and to engage in this kind of surface level stuff, it's really hard. And so if that's the only option, then people can sometimes just withdraw. You know what, I'm not going to do that. But when you can just about find the right person within the crowd, or not everyone goes to the pub that normally does, and you've got a bit more space to talk, I see men drinking that up. I mean, not literally, but they kind of, they really enjoy, those kind of conversations that just go a little bit further, and provide something more, because we're related beings, aren't we? We're kind of, we know ourselves and we shape ourselves through our relationships, and we're constantly looking for that. We're looking for that kind of engagement.
Definitely. So I think a lot of people sometimes know that there's an issue, but don't necessarily know where to start with tackling it. So if, say, you're in a smaller group in the pub or you've gone out with your friends, how would you suggest approaching those topics and starting the conversation?
I think, first of all, it's really fine to not know where to start. And in terms of therapy, which this isn't all about therapy, it's about kind of connecting with people in a meaningful way, and that could be anywhere. But with therapists, and once you go to therapy, you don't need to think, right, I've got a problem with X, and I'm going to talk about that with you, and we're going to talk about it for 6 sessions, and then I'll be done. It's like, most people don't really know about what therapy is, and they don't really know what's wrong. They can be banging off the trees, and when people come to therapy, often they're in a real spin and they don't know which way's up and which way's down. And therapy is a safe place to be able to try and untangle some of that stuff with a trusting relationship that isn't going to make judgments and can just go where you want to go. So, I know that's the therapy bit, and that wasn't what you asked for. But I think if you've got a good relationship with somebody, you'll probably know if something's off. Not always, and men and women can be very good at kind of masking how they are, to kind of present a certain face, present a certain thing, and but if you've got a good relationship with someone, you'll know. And I wouldn't get too caught up on thinking what's the exact wording, but think about the sentiment that is behind it. I want to reach out. I want him to know that I'm here. I want him to know that I care. And generally, because of all the stuff we talked about before, that men aren't as comfortable, I think, as women in talking about their feelings and being vulnerable, that men can sometimes go, oh, I just can't be bothered because I just don't know how to even start to approach it. And I think, just think, maybe don't go too deep, too fast. And you look depressed. Are you going to kill yourself? It's probably going to just not be the right approach. Don't go too light. Everything okay, mate? Yep, good. But think about something else. I've noticed that I'm not seeing you quite so much, just checking you're okay. Don't think about, get caught up on my words, just think about it as a kind of being in the middle, and also expect to get a pushback, that people will generally say, it's fine, don't worry about it, tomorrow's another day. Be persistent. And I think that's the kind of message, in a caring way, that kind of feels like it's your voice, it's your relationship, you know how to manage it, but just kind of find another way. Because if you're really at your lowest ebb, people just think it's a platitude. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. I don't want to burden them. And when someone reaches out again, it kind of can punctuate that. It can kind of pierce that and really contest it. So yeah.
Thank you. I know you mentioned before the concept of kind of resilience and the real meaning of that, and recognizing red flags in yourself and the importance of that. Would you be able to expand on that a little bit by what you meant when you mentioned that?
Yeah, sure. So I think that resilience can often mean for a lot of men that you are strong, that you are unshakable, that you are the rock that your family or your friends or your work, can be anchored to, and that's what many men kind of really like. I am that role that is that stability, is that, and that's a tough gig because everybody, absolutely everybody, has wobbles. Everybody has strains. It might be to do with loved ones. It might be to do with them, to do with their health. The world, life happens. And going back to the point about painting on a face, if you are really struggling, because everyone will, and you are always and forever that rock, there's going to be a time where it's it doesn't add up. And for me, being resilient is about knowing when to ask for help and being okay to say you don't know something, being fallible. And that is a real challenge for many men. I need to know, or I don't need to. It's like, when you do that, you kind of show the people around you that that's what strength is. And it might not be all the time, but at the times that you need it. And as I said before, within that, it says that strength is about being vulnerable and being fallible, and you don't have to crack into a million pieces, but you can be a bit more authentic, So if you do have, those warning signs of things breaking, we talked about, maybe you're not sleeping, too well, you're snapping a bit, you're becoming a bit argumentative, maybe you're preoccupied by kind of certain issues to do work, or I don't know, something else, or you're kind of doing stuff like work or trying to resolve something outside of when you think you should all the time. It's really encroaching into your life. These are the kind of red flags that say, take notice. Now, it's great to do stuff to try and resolve it, and of course you should, but it's thinking about not just the practical bit of how to resolve it, but the emotional bit too.
Definitely, and I think that's something that will really resonate with blue light workers and volunteers particularly, because on top of the pressure and standard to be a man, there's also the pressure to be, for want of a better word, a hero, and be that savior and the person running into the fire. When I remember someone saying once in one of the Q&As we did is, if I'm meant to be the savior, how do I then ask for help? So it's that kind of added layer of like stoniness, I guess, and not wanting to break through that.
Yeah, and we do a lot of work with people in the blue light community and offer therapy to people in the blue light community, and we see that. We hear it all the time. It's largely frontline male dominated, and so you see the I gave the analogy before about being a rock. This becomes compounded. It becomes compressed, and so this kind of sense of the strain that you're kind of holding. And the burden that you're kind of holding just gets more and more compounded. And the role of being a rock or being this kind of person that's unshakable becomes more sedimented. It's really harder then to break free from it. But that's when things pop. And it pops in a big way often. I think people use alcohol to kind of free it. I just can't do this anymore, or they'll have a really big inverted commas breakdown where I just turn off and switch off from everything, and they'll take time off work, And all these things can then really challenge their own identity about, I can't cope, I'm not good enough. And it's this vicious circle that can go around. But if you just got a bit of a steam valve, an escape valve that can kind of let out some of the pressure on yourself by saying, I don't have to be that perfect thing, that then that can really help. It's such a relief, that's freeing.
Definitely. I know you mentioned before the kind of aspect of seeking professional help and people not wanting to go to therapy and counselling and things like that. Probably because there is such a big stigma attached to it, and the sort of grey area where people don't feel like they're in a bad of a place enough to seek support.
Yeah.
So what are some of the common misconceptions you see within therapy and counselling services, particularly within men? What are the things that are cropping up time and time again when people do come to see you?
I think that point is right. I have to be at the rock bottom. I have to be absolutely desperate. I have to be, I can't sort this out myself. Where's all that come from? That's so unhelpful. That of course you need to try and resolve the issues yourself in life. Who wouldn't? But it's making it so hard for people. And like I said before, the kind of issue about needing to know what I'm going to get from them. Most people don't know what therapy is. There's loads of different types of therapy. Only people that know about therapy are the therapists, and there's hundreds of different types, and they're all kind of very precious about it. There's CBT, and there's kind of psychodynamic therapy, and all these different types. It all doesn't really matter. What matters is that you can find somebody that you connect with and you click with and that you trust, and that you can begin to talk about things that you would struggle to talk about with other people. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have a big problem or issue. It just means that you want to find out, you're curious, you want to explore stuff. And in doing so, it's cathartic, it's helpful, it clarifies things, and it relieves the pressure. And I think one of the biggest misnomers, particularly for men, is that who's in control. I'll go to this kind of, whether it's online or not, a kind of a booked room with someone that's really clever, that's got this kind of white coat, that's going to be the expert, that's going to tell you this, and it's like, and I'll have to talk about that, and it'll be really fast, it'll be too much, and I'll talk about things I'm not ready for, and it'll destroy me. Like, if I open up that can of worms, I'll never stop it. And it's like, well, all of that is wrong. All of that is not right. That right from the start, if you don't connect with the person, the therapist that's offering you support, change. We get that sense so quickly, sociably, within 5 seconds. You kind of know whether you're going to connect with somebody or not, and it's generally quite accurate. And that is all the more important for therapy. That you are in control of that. You are in control of what you talk about. You are in control at the start, in the middle, at the end. And it's useful to kind of say, I don't want to go there. And that's fine. And if you feel like you're being compelled to, or being urged to, or encouraged to, you don't have to stay. And before that, you think, well, actually, I might feel more comfortable talking with a man about some things, or a woman about these things. That's fine. There might be kind of issues that people have got in relation to their identity, maybe their race, their sexuality. You think, well, actually, there are some therapists that are open about their protected characteristics, their race, their sexuality, other things. And you think, well, that might kind of help in making this safer for me to speak. So I suppose I'm just trying to pop the bubble that therapy is done to you, and that you're going to be taken somewhere that you don't want to go. That's not what it is.
Yeah, and I think that's such a thing that crops up time and time again, is that idea that you're going to sit on a long sofa and lie down and talk about your childhood and not actually talk about what's bothering you in the moment. And we were speaking to Tough to Talk before, and they mentioned how often men don't see themselves as having a mental health issue. They see themselves as having a gambling issue, or an issue with their wife, or an issue of being a single parent and things like that. And it's about knowing when those little issues can just build up and build up, and when it's time to access support.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not trying to correct someone either. Someone says, I've got a gambling issue. Okay, let's talk about your gambling issue. And that might then uncover through the person doing it, talking, well, actually, I've been a bit flat, I've been a bit depressed, I've not got on with, and I think so much of mental health is situational. If you are really struggling at work because it's a really pressured environment, you don't like your boss, that's going to have a massive impact on you. If you're living somewhere that doesn't feel right, and you can't really relax, that's going to have an impact on you. If your finances are really tight and you can't afford to live, these things really do, I'm not going to explain them away, they have a massive impact on how you're feeling yourself. And that usually through therapy, you start off with these things. And then just through kind of a building up a relationship, you get curious, relationship, you begin to think, well, is that related to anything else that's happening now? Is it related to anything that's happened in the past? Is it related to anything that you want to be in the future? And these kind of things all kind of bring a deeper conversation. And it comes in the right way, in the right time, but it's not the kind of thing that usually people talk about down the pub. And now I'm not trying to diss the pub. I think the pub's got a great place, as of many other activities, for men to be a forum for people to start to talk. But it's usually, for example, I see a lot of people that have got difficulties with their intimate relationships, their partners, their husbands, their wives, and usually their friends in the pub or friends around know their wife or know their partner, and it's all quite interconnected. And so they can't talk openly with their friends about the difficulties they've got. They don't want to air their own, dirty laundry and feel like it's somehow going to get back and, I can't say things. But you won't get any of that with a therapist. There's none of that. And so there are some things that you just, it's a lot easier to talk about.
100%. And that vulnerability and that sense of, there doesn't need to be a sense of shame if you don't know them, is such an important point and not something that's considered much.
No.
I think, unfortunately, inevitably, people will probably listen to this and be like, whatever, I'm not going to therapy, and still be really against it. And that is inevitable.
Yeah.
If there is someone in that boat who's thinking, I'm not in the best place right now, but therapy is just not for me, I've tried it, it's not for me.
Yeah.
What DIY approaches would you recommend for what little things they can do within themselves at home when they're ready?
Yeah, and it's absolutely fine to not, short term, medium term, forever. It's completely down to people. I think there's practical things that people can do, but before you get to the practical things, is there something I should be doing that's a little kind of dark cloud for me? I've been meaning to do this for a while, and I just push it away. Or there's kind of something, and only you know what that is, and you kind of convince yourself, no, tomorrow, manana. But I'm not talking about practical things. I think about something that's bugging you, something that's annoying you, something that you've wanted to do for a while. And everyone is individual, everyone is unique. But if you've got that kind of nagging doubt, that grey cloud that only you know, then try and be brave and face it. And whatever that means. Therapy is one option within it, but there's lots of other things that can mean. That mean speaking to somebody that's kind of that I haven't spoken to for a long time, doing something with my boss that's kind of, it's been really stressing me out, thinking about making that jump in relation to my house, speaking to my partner about the future. There could be so many things. They're not therapy related, they're you related. And so that's just kind of the first kind of bit. I think that connections are so important, and so many people that come through for therapy talk about being depressed or having a low mood, and they're really isolated. They're not seeing many people, or people talk about frustration, and they've got lots of friends, but no real connections, no meaningful discussion like we talked about before. or they've got a few that they don't really see. And you think, you can be really lonely in a big crowd because you're not showing yourself. And so being able to kind of get some support with that, or not to get support, to be able to do something about that, to be able to, connect with people. It might be kind of playing sport, it might be doing some other activity. These things in themselves can really help. They can help say that this existence that I have isn't forever. And you don't know where each of these relationships go. They can kind of go in lots of different directions. So kind of connecting with people is really important. And if you kind of need to change your circle of friends even slightly because it gives you something back, do that and face that dark cloud, the thing that's kind of there, that's floating about, that's kind of that you need to address. And if if you're at work, and you kind of really feel like you want to talk to somebody, don't go to therapy about it, is there somebody that you trust? Is there someone that you can have a quiet word with to just say, I'm struggling a bit at the minute? That doesn't mean to say you have to go to therapy, and doesn't mean, but finding some outlet somewhere can be enough.
For further resources and support, visit bluelighttogether.org.